Hello everyone and welcome back to Dr. Creepy. In tonight's episode, we dive into 7 most disturbing true Canadian small-town horror stories. Chilling encounters from remote villages, frozen lakes, and quiet places where something else lives in the silence. From figures standing motionless in the middle of winter roads to voices screaming beneath miles of ice. From cabins that appear across frozen lakes to bush roads that loop endlessly back home. These stories reveal what happens when the wilderness decides to notice you. Rooftops shaking under heavy footsteps, shadows moving in abandoned mines, pale faces watching from the edge of the woods, and creatures dragging themselves through snow without leaving a single footprint. If you're new here, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new true horror stories. Now, get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's begin. I grew up on the prairies, where the roads stretch straight into the horizon, and winter feels less like a season and more like a presence watching you from every direction. People joke about the cold in Saskatchewan, but only the ones who've never lived there. The cold here has weight, memory, intention. I didn't believe that until the night I nearly froze to death on Highway 16 and saw something no one had warned me about. I was driving home from a late shift in December, heading toward my small town, Meadows Edge. It's one of those towns with a population sign that hasn't changed in 30 years because nobody moves in unless they're ready to disappear. I worked in the city an hour away, so the drive was familiar, even comforting. Usually, anyway. That night, the wind was blowing snow across the road in sheets so thick they looked like living things slithering under my headlights. The kind of night where you don't pull over unless you absolutely have to, because if your engine dies, so do you. I had my heater on full blast, music low, eyes scanning the edges of the drifts for deer. Everything felt normal until I saw him. At first, he was just a shape in the headlights. Dark, still, planted dead center in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes so hard my truck fishtailed before grinding to a stop. My heart punched my ribs as I gripped the wheel, trying to understand what I was looking at. A man stood 30 feet ahead, facing me, not waving, not walking, just there. He wore a dark coat that blended into the night, and the way he stood made every instinct in me recoil. Too straight, too stiff, too still. I honked, no reaction. I flashed my brights, nothing. My first thought was that maybe he was hurt, maybe drunk, maybe delirious from the cold, but the temperature outside was brutal, minus 37 with wind chill. Anyone standing under that wind wouldn't be standing for long. Still, I cracked the window an inch. "Hey," I shouted into the storm. "You okay?" No movement, not even a twitch. My adrenaline spiked. Something was wrong. People don't stand motionless in the middle of a highway in a blizzard. I put the truck in reverse, intending to back up and go around, but the rear tires just spun and skidded. I exhaled sharply. The road had iced over beneath me. I didn't want to get out of the truck, but I didn't want to sit there all night either. I grabbed my flashlight from the console, pulled my hat low, zipped my coat to my chin, and cracked the door. The cold slapped me immediately, hard, biting, alive. Snow whipped across the ground and stung my face. I stepped out just far enough to call again. "Do you need help, sir?" Slowly, the man lifted his head. The movement was unnatural, like his neck didn't have proper joints. It wasn't a normal looking up. It was more like something remembering how to imitate a human. A sinking dread spread through my chest. I didn't step closer. Something in me, some old instinct buried deep, kept every muscle frozen. I raised my light and flicked it toward him. The beam hit his coat first, then his face. I nearly stumbled backward. His face was wrong. The eyes were open, but unfocused, glazed over like frost-covered glass. His skin had that gray-blue tint of severe hypothermia, but his lips were the worst, split, cracked, frozen solid. And when my light passed over them, I realized they were parted just enough to show that his mouth was full of ice. Not ice in his beard, not frost around his lips, ice inside his mouth. I slammed the truck door and locked it out of pure instinct. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't react in any human way. He just stood, waiting, as if the cold itself had sculpted him for this exact moment. I flung the truck into drive and tried to inch forward, thinking maybe he'd move if I approached slowly. But he didn't. He stayed exactly where he was. I couldn't hit him, Even if he wasn't alive, I couldn't do it. So I swerved around him, wheels crunching over hardened snow. For a split second, as my headlights slipped away from him, I felt relief. Thin, fragile, stupid relief. Then I checked the rearview mirror. He was gone. Completely. Not walking away. Not fading in the distance. Just gone, like he'd blinked out of existence. I glanced back at the road, then at the mirror again. My pulse hammered against my skull. I muttered, "No, no," as the temperature display on my dash flickered, then dropped suddenly, unnaturally, like the air inside the truck was freezing too. I turned up the heat. Nothing changed. My defrost system started blowing cold air. A chill moved through the cab, deep enough to make my teeth chatter. I pulled my coat tighter. The windows began frosting from the inside. Then I saw movement ahead. At first it was just a shape in the swirling snow. My heart plummeted when I realized what I was seeing. The man was standing in the road again. Exactly the same pose, exactly the same distance from my truck. I had not passed anyone. The road was straight. I had not turned around. He was back. My hands shook uncontrollably. Was he following me? Was I circling without realizing it? Was the storm messing with my senses? I slammed the steering wheel once, desperate to think clearly. I decided to floor it. I didn't care anymore. I would hit him if I had to. I pressed down on the gas so hard the pedal nearly snapped, and the truck shot forward through the drifts. The man didn't move. At the last possible second, he stepped aside. Not like a living person, not with urgency or self-preservation, but with a slow, fluid shift that didn't match the stiffness I'd seen before. I blew past him, nearly losing control as the truck fishtailed. I didn't check the mirror. I couldn't. I drove the next 15 minutes in total silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. When the lights of Meadow's Edge finally appeared through the storm, I nearly cried. I made it home. I locked my doors. I pushed furniture against them. I paced the living room until dawn stained the snow pink. The next morning I went to the diner, because that's what you do in a small town when you're scared. You go where other people are. As soon as I walked in, old Carl from the volunteer fire department looked up from his coffee and said, "Long night?" I hesitated. Then I told him everything. He listened silently, stirring his coffee exactly once every time I paused. When I finished, he didn't laugh. He didn't doubt me. He just sighed and nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting this for a long time. "You swerved around him," he finally said. "You're lucky." "Lucky," I repeated. "I thought he was going to kill me." Carl shook his head. "No, the ones he steps in front of, they're the unlucky ones. The ones who slow down, try to help, or worse, the ones who stop completely." I felt a coldness creep into my bones that had nothing to do with the weather. Who was he? Carl looked out the window at the drifting snow. Name was Everett Sloan. Died on that road in a blizzard back in '78. Hitchhiking home from Saskatoon after losing his job. A semi never saw him standing there. Folks say he froze to death before he was hit. Driver swerved, barely missed him, and found Everett already dead, standing upright in the middle of the road, like the cold kept him on his feet. I felt myself go numb. "You're telling me he still stands there?" "Only some nights." Carl's voice dropped. "Only when the storm's bad. It's not him anymore. It's something using him, something that wants others to join it." I swallowed hard. "So why did it appear twice in front of my truck? How did it move?" Carl took a slow sip. "The stories say it'll keep getting in your way until you hit it, until you stop, until you freeze. That's how it works." My breathing went shallow. "Why did it let me go?" Carl looked at me with a sadness I didn't understand at first. "It didn't let you go," he said softly. "It just hasn't finished with you yet. I haven't driven that road again. Not once. But sometimes, when the wind screams across the prairies at night, I swear I hear footsteps crunching slowly past my front door. Heavy, steady, frozen footsteps, like someone patiently waiting for the next winter road, and the next chance to stand in front of me again." Northern Ontario winters have a way of swallowing sound. You can stand on a frozen lake at midnight and hear your own heartbeat echoing back at you from the tree line. People say the silence is peaceful, but that's only if you've never heard it break. Only if you've never heard something calling from a place where no voice should come from. I learned that the hard way, and I haven't gone near the ice since. I used to visit my uncle's cabin every winter. It sat near a small town called Silver Pine, not even on most maps anymore. A cluster of old buildings, a general store, a post office that closed 15 years ago, and houses spaced so far apart you could scream outside at midnight and no one would hear you. At least no one human. My uncle, George, lived alone on the edge of a lake called Lantern Lake, a wide, shallow body of water that froze solid every winter. Locals fished on it, skated on it, walked their dogs on it. It was a normal lake until night fell. The first evening I arrived that winter, the air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. I was unpacking when Uncle George stood by the window, staring at the lake with a stiff tension in his shoulders. "Don't go out after dark," he said quietly. I thought he was joking. He wasn't the superstitious type, and growing up I'd been out there with him 100 times. "Since when?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "Since last year." I waited for him to explain, but he didn't say anything else. He just closed the curtains. It was only 8 p.m., but he locked both doors, put another log in the wood stove, and double-checked the bolts. I laughed a little. "Expecting raccoons?" He didn't laugh back. "I'm expecting the cold," he said. I didn't understand then. I wouldn't understand until the second night. The first night passed without incident. We ate dinner, talked about work, watched a hockey game on the old TV that barely got any channels. Eventually, the cold wind lulled us both to sleep. The second night, I woke up to something strange. A sound. At first, I thought it was the wind whipping snow against the cabin windows. But this was different. It was muffled, distant, and too rhythmic to be weather. I sat up in bed and held my breath. Then I heard it again, faint, stretched across the lake like it was caught on the wind. "Help." My skin prickled. A person's voice. Far away. Desperate. I grabbed my coat, shoved my feet into boots, and stepped into the living room. My uncle was already awake, sitting stiffly on the couch, staring at the front door like something was on the other side. "You hear that?" I whispered. He closed his eyes, exhaled shakily. "They're starting earlier this year," he murmured. "Who?" He didn't answer. Outside, the voice rose again, clearer this time. "Please, someone, help me." I moved toward the window, but Uncle George grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't look." "What are you talking about?" I tried to pull away, but he held on. "Whatever you hear, don't go outside. Don't look at the lake. Don't answer it." "Uncle, promise me." His voice cracked on the last word. That scared me more than the voice outside. I nodded slowly. He let go. The screaming lasted for nearly an hour. Sometimes it sounded like a man, sometimes like a woman, sometimes like a child. Every variation was equally broken, equally hopeless. When the sound finally stopped, the silence that followed was somehow worse. We didn't sleep that night. By morning, the world looked normal. Snow blanketed the lake in untouched white. Trees stood still. Smoke rose lazily from the cabin's chimney. There were no footprints, no holes in the ice, no sign that anything had happened. I tried to question my uncle again, but he wouldn't talk. Wouldn't even look at the lake. So like an idiot, I went down to the shore alone. The ice was so thick you could drive a truck across it. I'd been on it every winter. I stepped out carefully, listening. The air was calm, not a sound. I walked farther. The lake stretched endlessly, shimmering under the pale sun. When I reached the middle, I crouched down and placed my gloved hand on the ice. Cold radiated up my arm, colder than it should have been, colder than the air itself, like something deep beneath was draining the warmth. I jerked my hand back. A crack echoed from somewhere in the distance, not loud but sharp. It sounded like something shifting inside the ice, far below. I stood quickly and jogged back to shore. At dinner, I told my uncle where I'd gone. He slammed his fist on the table. "I told you not to go on that lake. What's going on? You need to tell me." He ran both hands over his face, defeated. "Last winter, the screaming started. Same as you heard last night." "So you called for help?" He looked at me sharply. "You don't call for help for something that's been dead a long time." The hairs on the back of my neck rose. He continued, voice low. "The first night I heard it, I went out, thought it was a snowmobiler who fell through. Took a rope, an axe, everything. And," he swallowed, throat bobbing, "I saw someone under the ice." I froze. They were right under my feet, eyes open, mouth open, hands pressed against the underside of the ice like they were trying to climb up through it. What did you do?" He shook his head. "There was no hole, No crack, no break, they were sealed inside, like the lake swallowed them whole. A chill shot through me, and when I stepped back, his voice trembled. Their face moved with me, followed me, still screaming, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Not with my ears. I felt it in my head. I stared at him, horrified. I ran. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Did anyone else see it? He nodded slowly. 2 ice fishers from town, but they didn't hear the screams. They heard something else, children laughing or a woman singing. So it changes what you hear? Yes. I leaned back, breath shallow. What does it want? A long silence. Finally, he whispered, "Company." That night, I couldn't help myself. Curiosity gnawed at me until I was practically shaking. I waited until my uncle fell asleep, then crept to the window. I lifted the curtain the smallest amount. A figure stood on the lake, far out, unmoving, human-shaped. I watched it for almost a minute, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. Then it lifted its arm, slow, jerky, pointing directly at the cabin. My breath hitched, and then, from the lake, "Help me." But the voice wasn't distant anymore. It was right outside the cabin wall. I stumbled backward and fell onto the floor, knocking over a stack of firewood. The noise woke my uncle, who rushed into the room. He grabbed me by the shoulders. "You looked, didn't you?" Before I could answer, something scraped across the cabin's exterior, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across wood. My uncle killed the lantern. We stood in pitch darkness. The scraping continued along the wall, circling slowly. I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. Then came the voice again, but this time it wasn't pleading. It was whispering, soft, taunting. "I see you." My uncle pushed me into the hallway and motioned for silence. The voice drifted around the cabin, sometimes right next to the window, sometimes far away, sometimes under the floorboards. Eventually it faded, but the fear didn't. The next morning, we found something outside. Tracks, not footprints, drag marks, like something had been pulled across the lake to the cabin. They led right up to the wall, then stopped. No return trail. My uncle packed immediately. "We're leaving." I didn't argue. I didn't even breathe until we were 5 miles from the lake. We stayed in town that night, but the cabin wasn't empty. Around 11 p.m., the phone rang in our motel room. My uncle answered. He went pale. It's your voice," he whispered, handing the phone to me with a shaking hand. I put it to my ear. From the other end, the frozen static parted. Help me. I'm still waiting." I dropped the phone. It kept screaming long after it hit the floor. We never went back to the cabin. We never even retrieved our things. A month later, the ice fishers found something. Near the center of Lantern Lake, embedded under the ice, pressed against the frozen barrier as if reaching up. A face. My face. Mouth open, eyes frozen wide. No one could explain it. No one tried. The town closes access to the lake every winter now. Doesn't matter. Locals say the screaming can still be heard on cold nights. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, the voice changes. Sometimes it sounds like me. Still calling for help. Still waiting for someone to come out onto the ice. Still wanting someone to look down and see what's trapped beneath. And the worst part, every time I hear it, it knows my name. People talk about the cold in Manitoba like it's an inconvenience. Bundle up, they say, or it's a good day for ice fishing. But if you've ever lived near the lakes in winter, really lived there deep into January, you know the cold isn't just weather. It changes the land, it changes sound, it changes you, and sometimes it brings things with it. I used to think the stories about Lake Larkspur were just old Métis tales, warnings told to kids so they wouldn't wander onto the ice alone. My dad used to tell me one, that on certain nights, a cabin appears on the far side of the lake, glowing with warm golden light. Not a real cabin, not one you'd find on any property map. A trick of the cold, he said, a mirage. But you weren't supposed to walk toward it, because you won't stop walking, he used to say, and it won't stay where it is. I laughed it off for most of my life. Even as an adult, living back in my hometown of Larkspur Crossing after my parents passed, I thought it was just folklore. Then the winter of last year proved me wrong. I was 33, working as a delivery driver for a distribution company. I rented a small cabin on the north shore of the lake, cheap, isolated, perfect for someone who preferred quiet to company. I could see the whole lake from my kitchen window, a frozen expanse that stretched nearly 3 kilometers across. My closest neighbor lived a 15-minute walk away. The first time I saw the lights, I thought I was just overtired. It was mid-January, bitterly cold. The temperature had dropped below 40 degrees Celsius with the wind chill, and the air felt like glass whenever I breathed in. I was washing dishes after dinner when a warm flicker on the ice caught my eye. It was far off, near the southern end of the lake, a soft golden glow like someone had lit a fireplace. I wiped a patch of frost from the inside of the window and squinted. A cabin, wooden small, with a pitched roof and one front window glowing with warm yellow light. Smoke rising from a chimney that I swear hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. I frowned. No one lived on that side of the lake anymore. 2 cabins were abandoned. One had burned down years ago, and the old trapper's shack had collapsed last spring. Yet there it was, a perfect intact log cabin, shining like a lantern in the dark. I went to grab my phone, thinking maybe I could zoom in enough to see more detail. But when I lifted it to the window, the cabin was closer. I froze, staring. The distance between my cabin and the southern shore was roughly a kilometer. The strange cabin had been near the far tree line. Now it sat maybe 3/4 of the way across the lake. Impossible. I blinked hard. For a moment, the light flickered, almost like someone inside had moved in front of the window. I stepped back from the glass, unsettled. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the refraction of light on ice could play tricks on you. Maybe a soft knocking echoed through the cabin. Not from the front door, not from the back door, not from the side windows. It came from beneath my feet. I stood absolutely still, heartbeat hammering in my ears. The knock came again, 3 slow taps from under the floorboards. I backed away from the kitchen, toward the bedroom, and grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand. I returned cautiously, knelt beside the floor vent, and listened. Nothing, just the groaning of the wind pushing against the walls. When I stood, I glanced out the window again. The cabin was gone. 2 days passed without a vent. I convinced myself it had been a combination of exhaustion, cold, and low visibility. Winter does that, distorts distance, hides and reveals things like a living lens. But on the 3rd night, I saw it again. This time, the light wasn't golden. It was white-blue, flickering like fluorescent bulbs struggling to stay alive. The cabin stood farther to the west, near the area where locals occasionally ice fished. I could see the roof, the chimney, the window, and, this time, a shape moving inside. A person, at least, the outline of one, standing completely still behind the glowing window, watching me. My breathing grew shallow. Instinct said, turn off the lights, close the curtains, pretend you didn't see it. Curiosity said, look closer. Against all logic, I grabbed my binoculars from the drawer. The moment the lenses aligned with the cabin, the figure inside snapped its head toward me. Not slowly, not gradually, but instantly, like it knew I was watching. It pressed its hands against the window. Long hands, too long. The fingers extended down the glass, almost reaching the sill. My stomach twisted. The cabin's light flickered again. And suddenly, the cabin wasn't on the west side anymore. It was in the middle of the lake. I stumbled backward so fast I knocked over a chair. I wouldn't have believed any of it if I hadn't been staring through the binoculars a second earlier. I scrambled to shut my curtains, triple-locked my door, and shoved a dresser against it for good measure. The cold outside deepened. I could feel it pressing against the walls, seeping into the glass, creeping across the floorboards like frost with intention. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I walked to my neighbor's house. Her name was Pam, a retired paramedic who'd lived here for years. She invited me in, poured coffee, and looked at me with concern. "You look awful," she said. I told her everything, the lights, the cabin, the shape inside. She didn't look surprised. "You shouldn't look at it," she said softly, "no matter where it shows up." "You've seen it?" She nodded. "Not this winter, but most winters." "Whose cabin is it?" I asked. She hesitated. "It isn't a cabin at all. That's just how it looks from a distance. People say it's a lure." "A lure?" "A trap, if you want to be blunt. Something that draws you onto the ice. And once you get close enough, the cold does the rest." I swallowed hard. "What's inside it?" "No one who went toward it has come back," she said. "But some things have washed up in the spring." "What things?" Her eyes darkened. "Not whole things." My blood ran cold. She leaned closer. "If you see the lights again, turn every lamp off and wait it out. It loses interest if you ignore it." I went home shaken but grateful for the warning. That night, the lights returned, bright, closer, much closer. I turned off every light in my cabin, sat in the dark, and listened to the wind scrape across the walls. Then came the knocking again. Not from below, from the front door. 3 slow taps. I held my breath, refusing to move, remembering what Pam said. The tapping grew harder, then circled to the back door, then the bedroom window. Something was walking around my cabin, pressing lightly into the walls, testing them. Every step crunched on the frozen ground. No rhythm, no human cadence. More like something dragging itself, adjusting its weight awkwardly, unfamiliar with how a body should move. A whisper pressed against the glass. Cold, come in. I squeezed my eyes shut. The whisper deepened. No longer a voice, but wind squeezing through unseen cracks. Open, door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. After what felt like hours, the sounds faded. When dawn came, the cabin light was gone again. But the worst night came soon after. The storm was one of the worst of the season. Snow hammered the windows hard enough to shake the frames. I was reading in bed, trying to ignore the howling wind, when the power went out. The cabin sank into darkness. I reached for my flashlight, and as soon as it clicked on, I felt a cold pulse of air on my neck, like the entire room exhaled. I walked to the living room window, dreading what I knew I'd see. The cabin on the lake, right in the center, bright as a bonfire, and inside, a figure pressed against the window. Only this time, it wasn't just watching, it was smiling. A stretched, unnatural smile, far too wide for the shadowy face behind it. I stepped away from the window, heart pounding. My breath fogged the air so thickly I could barely see. The lake groaned, deep, echoing, like something enormous shifting beneath the ice. Crack. A sound so loud it vibrated the floor. I ran to the back door, thinking the ice had finally split. But before I could unlock it, the flashlight flickered and the light from the lake vanished. I pressed my ear to the door. The wind was gone. The storm was silent. Then a soft, clear sound drifted through the night. Footsteps, on my porch, slow, crunching, deliberate. I stepped backward, then another step, and another. The footsteps followed on the other side of the door. I held the flashlight in shaking hands and pointed it at the window. A face stared back at me, not the face of anyone human. Eyes too white, skin too pale, mouth cracked with frost. It whispered one word, inside. The door handle turned. I screamed and shoved the dresser back against the door. A heavy thud shook the frame, then another, and another. Something was trying to get in. I grabbed my keys, ran to the bedroom window, threw it open despite the cold, and climbed out into the freezing night. The snow was deep, the wind sliced my face raw, but I sprinted toward Pam's house, slipping and stumbling. Behind me, something stepped onto my porch, then off it, then onto the snow. Chasing, but not fast, not running, just walking, because it knew I couldn't run forever in that cold. By the time I reached Pam's, I was half frozen. She dragged me inside and slammed the door. I collapsed on her floor, shaking uncontrollably. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. "You looked too long," she whispered. I never returned to my cabin. Never even went back for my things. When the thaw came in spring, Pam called me. "They found something on the lake," she said. My heart sank. "What?" She hesitated. "Your cabin, out on the ice, like it had been dragged." "That's impossible," I murmured. "No," she whispered. "Just unnatural." "And the cabin, the one I saw?" "Gone," she said, "until next winter." I moved south a week later. But no matter how far I go, every time I see frost ripple across a window, every time I hear wind whistle through cracks in an old house, every time I see a warm light shining where no house should be, I feel eyes on me, waiting. Because whatever that cabin is, whatever waits inside it, it doesn't forget the people who see it. And someday, when the cold is deep enough, when the light is just right, when the ice stretches flat beneath the moon, I know it will appear again. Closer, always closer. If you've never driven through the back roads of Newfoundland at night, it's hard to explain how different they feel from normal roads. They aren't just empty. They're alone, completely cut off from the rest of the world, twisting through thick black forest where the trees grow so close to the gravel you feel like they're leaning over you. It's the kind of quiet that presses against the windows, the kind that eats your headlights. I've lived in Newfoundland my whole life, but it wasn't until last winter that I learned some roads aren't meant to be traveled at night. and some roads don't go anywhere at all. My fiancée, Emily, and I were driving back to her mother's place in a tiny fishing community near Port Rexton. It was a 5-hour trip from St. John's, and I'd worked late, so we didn't hit the highway until after 10. By midnight, we were deep in the back roads, with nothing but the hum of the engine and the sound of tires crunching over frozen gravel. Everything was fine until the storm hit. It rolled in fast, wind slamming the truck from the side, snow swirling so thick the high beams only made the world whiter. We slowed to a crawl, squinting through the windshield. "You sure this is the right turn?" Emily asked, frowning at the GPS. "It's the only one that goes to her place," I said. "Old Forest Road. Locals use it all the time." The GPS flickered, then froze, then restarted with a cold blue glow. Recalculating, I smacked it lightly. Piece of junk. The wind howled louder as we turned onto the narrow bush road. The truck's tires slipped, caught, then steadied. Trees tightened around us like they were trying to squeeze out whatever little light we had left. The deeper we went, the quieter the world became. No wind, no sound of snow hitting the roof, just engine and breath. I didn't notice the first sign something was wrong until we passed the same overturned fishing boat. It was on the right side of the road, half buried in a snowdrift, old and cracked, paint peeling in long strips. "Didn't we just pass that?" Emily asked. I forced a laugh. "Another one. People leave stuff all over these roads." She didn't look convinced. A few minutes later, the truck's headlights cut through the blowing snow and illuminated the exact same overturned boat again. Same angle, same drift, same cracked hull. My breath hitched. "Okay," I muttered. "That's weird." Emily's voice dropped. "Are we going in circles?" "No," I said quickly. "There's only one direction on this road. It's straight." Another 5 minutes, another bend, another long stretch, and then the boat again. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a loop in the road. That wasn't possible here. There were no turnoffs, no side roads, no way we could have turned around without noticing. Yet the boat sat beside the road like a sentinel waiting for us. "Stop the truck," Emily whispered, but I didn't. I couldn't. The strangest part, the forest didn't look the same around it each time. First time, the drift was small. Second, larger. Third, different. It was almost like the road was repeating the boat, not looping us back to it, like it wanted us to see it again. The fourth time we passed it, something was different. This time, the boat was turned slightly toward the road. It hadn't been before, and on the side facing us, deep in the old wood, were fingernail scratches. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Deep, fresh. Emily covered her mouth. I kept driving, knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. "This isn't right," I muttered. "We should have reached the coast by now." The GPS flickered back on, recalculating, recalculating, recalculating. Then, for a split second, the map zoomed out, showing our position as a single red dot in a sea of black. No roads, no landmarks, no towns, just void. Then it shut off completely. The storm outside died as suddenly as if someone had flipped a switch. The snow stopped, the wind fell silent, the world became unnervingly still. Emily leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "Stop the truck." "What? Stop." Her voice was trembling, so I did. The truck idled, rumbling softly. We both stared ahead. There was something in the road, a shape. At first it looked like a fallen log, but then the headlights shifted with the rocking of the engine, and the shape resolved into something unmistakable. A person. Standing in the middle of the bush road, not moving, not reacting, just standing with their head bowed. My throat went dry. "We should help," I said automatically, but even as the words left my mouth, I didn't believe them. Something about the figure was wrong. Their outline was too rigid, their arms hung too straight, and the snow all around them, fresh, untouched, showed no footprints. None, not leading to them, not leading away. "Drive around," Emily whispered. I tried, I really did, but the moment I shifted into reverse, the truck jerked violently and stalled. The dashboard lights died, the heater cut out, the radio went silent. Just like that, the truck was dead. I tried the key again, nothing. Cold crept into the cab instantly. Breath turned to fog. The windshield frosted from the inside. The figure in the road lifted its head. Slowly, too slowly, like the neck didn't work right, like it was resisting the movement. When the face lifted enough to reflect the headlights, I almost screamed. The eyes were pale, glassy, open far too wide. The skin was a sickly blue-gray, hair frozen to the skull, mouth cracked with frost. It looked like a drowned corpse pulled from the ocean after too many days. Emily gripped my arm. Go now. I can't, I whispered. The truck, the headlights flickered. The figure stepped forward, one step, slow, deliberate, like its joints were stiff or broken, then another and another. The fog on the windshield thickened until we could barely see. Suddenly the shape vanished behind the frost. Something tapped on the passenger window. 3 slow, steady knocks. Emily whimpered, covering her ears. I stared at the window, terrified to look, terrified not to. A shadow moved on the other side of the glass. Not a human shadow. Longer. Distorted. Like the limbs didn't bend right. Don't look, Emily whispered. Don't look at it. I squeezed my eyes shut and heard the softest voice through the glass. Home. The knocking shifted to the driver's side, then the back window, then the roof. Something climbed onto the truck. The metal groaned under the weight. Then, silence. I opened my eyes just enough to see. The headlights had come back on. The road ahead was clear. No figure, no boat, no storm, like nothing had happened at all. The truck engine roared to life on its own. Emily grabbed my arm. Go. Don't ask questions. Just go. I floored it. The truck shot forward so fast we nearly slid off the road, but I kept it straight. I didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't speak. 20 minutes later, we saw lights. Real lights. Street lights. A sign appeared. Welcome to Lark Cove, population 71. We pulled into her mother's driveway, shaking, frozen, barely coherent. Her mother opened the door wide, confused. What took you so long? That road only takes 15 minutes. We'd been on it for nearly 2 hours. The next morning, I retraced our route in daylight. There was no overturned boat, no figure, no loops, and the bush road we swore we took didn't exist. There was just forest, dense, untouched, stretching for miles. I stood there for a long time, staring into the trees, trying to force logic into something that had none. That night at dinner, her uncle, an old fisherman with a face carved by salt and wind, listened quietly as we told the story. When we finished, he nodded once. That road's been gone since '92, washed out in a storm, took a man and his truck into the woods, never found him. I swallowed. Then how? You didn't drive it, he said. My voice cracked. Then what did we drive? He stared at me with something like pity. Some roads lead somewhere. Some roads lead nowhere. And some roads, he lowered his voice, lead back to those who died on them. I didn't sleep that night. I still dream of snow, of a blue-gray face peering through frost, of knocking on glass, of headlights cutting through a forest road that shouldn't exist. And every winter, when the storms get bad and the wind shifts in that strange way, I swear I hear 3 soft taps on my window, like something searching, like something patient, like something that remembers me. Because I think that road was never meant to bring us home. I think it's still waiting for us to take the wrong turn again. I grew up in a small coastal town in Nova Scotia, one of those tight-knit places where every house leans toward the ocean, rust creeps up every metal surface, and the sea wind never quite leaves your clothes. It's the kind of town where people don't lock their doors, not because there's no crime, but because everyone knows the same things, fears the same things, and avoids the same places. For us, the place to avoid was the old cemetery on Birch Road. Not the cemetery itself, every town has one, but the thin stretch of woods behind it, a narrow wall of black spruce and fir trees that seemed to rise taller than the rest. As kids, we called it the Edge, and every parent in town warned us not to go anywhere near it after dark. They never said why. Just that it wasn't safe. We had our stories, of course, ghosts, witches, creatures, but they were childish ideas. Nothing compared to the truth I found out decades later. And it all started the night I first saw the woman at the edge of the woods. I had moved back to town after years away, mostly to help my mother after her surgery. She lived close to the cemetery, just 2 houses down the hill. I promised I'd stay for a few months, take her to appointments, help with chores, cook her dinners. It was early November when I returned. The nights were long and cold, the kind that felt wet even without rain. It was around 9 one evening when I stepped outside to bring in some firewood. Fog had crawled in from the coast, thick enough to coat the road like milk. My breath rose in front of me in pale clouds. I stacked the wood in my arms and turned toward the house, but something tugged at my attention. A feeling at first, pull, a wrongness. I looked toward the cemetery. Through the fog, faintly lit by the dim orange streetlight, I saw a figure standing at the very edge of the tree line. A woman. Her silhouette was unmistakable. Long hair, long dress, thin, motionless frame. At first I thought I was imagining it. The fog distorted shapes, shadows clumped together, my mind filled in gaps. But something about her posture, too rigid, too upright, sent a thin ribbon of ice down my spine. She wasn't facing the cemetery, she was facing my direction, watching. I blinked. She didn't move. I looked away for only a second, a reflex, and when I looked back, she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just empty fog. A prickle rose on the back of my neck. I gathered the wood quickly and went inside. My mother was watching TV in her recliner. I told her what I saw, expecting her to brush it off. Instead, her face went pale. "You saw her," she whispered. "Her? Who?" She shook her head slowly. "Don't look at the woods after dark, Nathan. Don't look directly at her. That's how she starts." "How who starts?" I pressed. She refused to answer, just turned up the TV and watched it with a tension that worried me. That night I dreamed of the woman, standing at the edge of the woods, staring at the house, face hidden by her hair. When I woke, the dream clung to me, cold and sticky, like fog that had seeped into my lungs. The next morning I walked down to the cemetery. Fog still lingered, but softer now. Birds hopped between headstones. The world felt normal again. I walked to the tree line where I'd seen her. The ground was undisturbed, the soil soft, the branches unmoved, no footprints in the wet earth. But the deeper I looked into the forest, the darker it became. Light didn't fall inside the trees like it should have. It stopped at the edge and went no further. The interior was black, unnaturally black. A prickle crawled along my spine. Something about those woods felt wrong, like they didn't belong, like they were older than everything else around them, older than the town, older than the land. I didn't step in. I just stared a moment longer and thought I saw movement deep inside, a pale shape sliding silently between trees. I left fast. The woman didn't appear again for a few days. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined her. But the town felt different. People looked tired, distracted. Whenever I passed someone near Birch Road, they glanced at the woods the same way I did, quick, nervous, unwilling to linger. On the fifth night, I saw her again. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when a flicker in my peripheral vision made me look out the window. She was standing at the woods again, same position, same posture, but closer than before, not at the cemetery's edge, just behind my mother's backyard fence. She stood perfectly still, no sway, no breath, no sound. Her face was angled toward the house. I snapped the curtain shut immediately. My heart thudded in my chest like a fist pounding on wood. When my mother came into the kitchen, she saw my expression and frowned. "You saw her again." I nodded. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I hoped you wouldn't. She usually stays near the cemetery. Not everyone sees her, only those who've lost someone recently." I stared. "Mom, Dad died 5 years ago." She shook her head. "It doesn't have to be recent in time, only recent in your heart." I didn't know how to respond. "So who is she?" I finally asked. My mother hesitated, then whispered, "No one knows. She's been seen here for generations." "A ghost? I don't think so." "A person? No." I swallowed. "Then what?" My mother's voice trembled. "Something that looks like one." A chill ran through me. Over the next week, things escalated. The woman appeared almost every night, always at dusk, always in the same spot near the woods, always staring at the house. Sometimes her head tilted slightly, sometimes her hands hung lower like her arms were lengthening. Sometimes her dress blew in a wind I couldn't feel. But one night, she was even closer. I had trouble sleeping and went downstairs to get water. As I passed the living room window, movement outside made me stop. She stood in our yard, not at the fence, not at the trees in the yard, 10 feet from the window. Her long hair hung so low it brushed the ground, covering her face entirely. Her pale hands dangled at her sides. Fingers too long, the joints slightly wrong, like branches bent the wrong way. I froze. She didn't move. She didn't react. She just stood there, angled toward the window, watching. I backed away slowly until I reached the staircase. When I turned, my mother was standing at the top, hand over her mouth. "She's closer," my mother whispered. "It's happening faster with you." "What is?" My mother didn't answer. The next morning, I was determined to get answers. I went into town to the small local museum run by Mr. Path Callahan, a man in his 70s who knew every story the town had ever told. I asked him directly. "The woman at the woods," I said. "What is she?" He looked up slowly, eyes hardening. "You saw her?" "Yes." He motioned for me to close the door. I did. He locked it. Then he spoke. "She doesn't appear to everyone, only those she notices." "Why does she notice people?" "Because she's looking for someone." "Who?" He leaned forward. "Someone whose grief she can wear, someone empty enough for her to fill." My breath caught. "She's not human." "No. And she wasn't always a woman either. She takes forms, faces, shapes." A cold shiver cut down my spine. Mr. Callahan continued. "When I was young, she looked different. When my father was young, different still. She changes with the times, with the people she mimics." "Why does she stand there?" "To be seen," he whispered, "and to be recognized." I swallowed. "What happens if she gets too close?" His expression darkened. "Ask the families who had children vanish back in '82, or the man who disappeared from Birch Road in '99, or the widow last spring. What happened to them? You already know." My hands shook. "Tell me how to stop her." "You can't," he said. "You can only avoid looking at her directly. If you look too long, she grows stronger, closer. She takes the shape that matches your loss." "My loss?" He nodded. "Your father." Cold rushed through me. That night, my mother woke me abruptly. "She's closer," she whispered, panic breaking her voice. "Nathan, don't go downstairs, she's at the door." I tensed. "What?" I grabbed my phone, clicked it on, and held it as we crept to the stairs. From downstairs, a soft tapping. At the front door, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My mother trembled beside me, whispering sharply, "Don't look, don't answer." But something else came with the knocks. A voice, faint, muffled but unmistakable, my father's voice. "Nathan, open the door." I froze. Tears stung my eyes. "That's not him," my mother said firmly, gripping my wrist. "She learns the voice when she learns the shape." The knock came again, harder, then his voice again. "Nathan, please, it's cold." My chest tightened painfully. My father used to say that every winter after shoveling the driveway, "It's cold, boy. Let's go inside." Hearing it again now nearly broke me. Then the doorknob turned, slowly, metal scraping metal. I stepped backward instinctively. My mother whispered, "She's almost taken his shape. She's close now. Too close." A shadow slipped across the space beneath the door, a tall, thin shadow, bending unnaturally, fingers brushing the hardwood. "Son?" The voice trembled. "Please let me in." I almost broke. But the way the voice trembled wasn't right. It cracked in places my father's had never cracked. Like someone practicing the sound of grief, the cadence of love, but missing the details. I backed away. The shadow under the door shifted, flattening, stretching out like something spreading across the floor. The doorknob rattled violently. My mother whispered, "Don't run. She follows movement. Stay still." So we did. We stood there, unmoving, while something pressed against the door with slow, dragging weight. The wood groaned, then a metallic sound. Click, the deadbolt slid open. My mother gasped. She's learned the lock. The door handle turned, once, twice, slow, careful. I could barely breathe. But the chain lock, thank God, held. Something pulled at it sharply, hard enough to shake the frame. The chain strained, squealed, bent. My mother whispered, "If she breaks it, run to the cemetery. It weakens her." The graves. The chain groaned. Then, nothing. Silence. The shadow under the door faded. The handle stilled. We waited almost an hour before moving. The next morning I checked the porch. There were footprints in the frost. Bare footprints, leading to the door, but none leaving. None. My stomach twisted. She was somewhere nearby, watching, waiting, learning. That night I barricaded the door with furniture. I shut every curtain, blocked every window, and kept every light on. Around 2 a.m. the lights flickered. My heart dropped. I heard breathing outside the front door. Not human breathing. Wet, slow, dragging. Then a whisper through the wood. "Nathan." It wasn't my father's voice this time. It was mine. I collapsed to my knees, shaking violently. My mother grabbed me, pulling me back. "She has enough of you now," she whispered. "She doesn't need distance anymore." The breathing grew louder, closer. Then the front door bent inward just slightly, as if something pressed its face against it. A pale shape appeared behind the peephole, a large, white, distorted eye. Watching, unblinking. The thing whispered again, "I know you." The voice was perfect. My voice, my tone, my cadence. Something scratched down the door in long, deliberate lines. Testing, tasting, claiming. The wood warped with each drag. My mother whispered, "She can't come in unless you open the door. She must be let in." I covered my ears, trying not to hear the voice mimicking mine, begging, pleading, whispering nightmares I had never said aloud. Around dawn, she stopped. The presence lifted. The pressure faded. We left the next morning. My mother came with me. We packed only what we could carry and drove straight out of town without looking back. Neighbors watched us go with knowing eyes, as if they'd seen this before, too many times. I haven't returned to Nova Scotia since, but sometimes, in parking garages, in wooded parks, in the dark corners of hotel rooms, in reflections where they shouldn't be, I see long hair, a too thin figure, fingers too long. A head tilted slowly toward me, and at night, just before sleep, I hear my own voice whispering from the corner, "I'm closer now." Because she follows. Because once she knows you, once she learns your shape, your grief, your voice, she never leaves. She waits, at the edge of whatever woods are nearest, watching, always watching. You never really understand silence until you've lived in a small Quebec village in the dead of winter. Real silence isn't peaceful. It's unsettling. It presses against your ears, makes your breathing sound too loud, makes you realize how truly alone you are. I used to think silence was just the absence of noise. Now I know it's something alive. It started my first winter after moving back to my hometown of Saint Cyril, a small community north of Quebec City. My parents left me the old family house when they moved to Ontario. I thought returning would be peaceful, quiet mornings, cozy evenings by the wood stove. I wasn't prepared for what I heard that first night. The footsteps. Heavy, measured, slow, pacing across my roof in the middle of a snowstorm. The night it began, the wind was howling hard enough to shake the shutters. I sat on the couch, listening to the wood crackle in the stove, sipping tea, trying to convince myself the isolation wasn't getting to me. Then the power cut out. Everything went black, except for the dim orange glow in the stove window. I sighed. Winter power outages were common. I put on my coat and boots to get more wood from the porch. The snow was falling in thick sheets, swirling like ghosts in the beam of my flashlight. It was then, as I stepped outside, that I heard it. A thump. On the roof. I froze. Another thump. Then another. Slow, steady, and heavy. The snowfall muffled everything except that sound. Something big was walking across the roof. I shone my light upward, but snow blinded me. All I saw were flakes whipping past like white needles. "Probably a branch," I whispered. "Snow sliding, ice shifting." But the footsteps continued, slowly, methodically, like something was circling. A roof cat? No. Too heavy. A raccoon? Impossible. Too slow. Too deliberate. A person? No one would be out in this. I backed into the house and shut the door, heart pounding. I locked it, even though I wasn't sure why. Whatever was on the roof wasn't going to try the door. Inside, the footsteps were louder, clearer, moving inch by inch across the shingles. Snow thudded down the sides of the house as something large shifted its weight overhead. I stood beneath the ceiling, staring upward like I could see through the wood. Silence. Then a slow, dragging sound, like something pulling its foot through deep snow. But on the roof, I whispered, "Please be wind," even though I already knew it wasn't. That night I didn't sleep. I sat awake until the storm calmed and the footsteps faded into the sound of melting snow sliding off the eaves. When dawn came, I went outside cautiously. Snow around the house was untouched, smooth, perfect, and the roof was coated in a thick layer of fresh powder. No tracks, no indentations, nothing. I didn't hear the footsteps again for almost a week. The weather stayed calm. I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, a trick of the storm, stress, something mundane. I even joked about it on the phone with my sister. Then the second storm hit, harder than the first. Wind screaming against the siding, snow battering the windows, and at around midnight, as I sat by the fire with a book, thump. On the roof, my breath caught. The footsteps returned, but not pacing this time. They moved straight toward the chimney, slowly, heavily, then stopped directly above me. Silence, total. I turned off the TV, listening. The wood stove creaked, heat hissed through the vents, and then a faint scratching sound came from inside the chimney. My mouth went dry. Snow sliding couldn't make that sound, neither could branches. This was something inside the chimney, just above the metal flue. I backed away slowly. The scratching grew louder, harder, rhythmic, Then something scraped the metal sides, like long nails dragging slowly downward. I grabbed my coat and ran outside into the storm. The cold slapped my face, burning my lungs as I rushed into the yard, desperate to see the roof. The snow was blinding, whipping violently across my flashlight beam, but there, just barely, I saw a dark shape move, a silhouette, massive, too big to be human, crawling across the peak of the roof. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the snow. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the light. The shape froze when the beam hit it, not turning, not reacting, just going perfectly still, like a predator deciding whether to pounce. Then the light flickered, once, twice, went out. The storm swallowed everything. I ran inside and locked the door behind me. The footsteps resumed minutes later, slower, heavier, pacing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until dawn. After that, the footsteps came every storm. Never during calm weather, never during wind alone, only when the snow came thick, suffocating, blinding, every storm night, like clockwork. I tried explaining it to people in town. Most brushed it off, too much time alone, winter madness, imagination. But two people reacted differently. Mrs. Fontaine, a neighbor in her 70s, went pale as a sheet. "You hear them walking?" she whispered. I nodded. She made the sign of the cross. "Don't go outside when it's storming, child. Don't look at it. Don't let it know you're listening." "Let what know?" I asked. She shook her head like a frightened child. "Whatever walks when the wind brings the dead." That didn't help. The second reaction came from the local handyman, Mark. He'd been doing repairs on old houses for decades. When I mentioned the footsteps, he just stared at me with a grim expression. "What part of the roof?" he asked. "What do you mean? Left side? Center? Near the chimney?" "Near the chimney," I said slowly. He stiffened. "Then don't sleep in the living room anymore." I swallowed. "Why?" "Because when it finds the chimney, it'll find the house." The worst night came early February. A blizzard slammed into the region so violently the house shook. The sky was invisible, swallowed by swirling white. Snow piled against the windows, rising inch by inch. I tried to distract myself with a movie, but the wind made the walls groan like an old ship on rough waters. Then the power died. Again, no lights, no heat, just the fire in the wood stove and the sound of the storm. And then, the footsteps. Not like before, not pacing, running, heavy, pounding leaps across the roof, shaking the ceiling plaster. I froze, staring upward. Whatever was up there, it was fast and strong and agitated. Snow slid off the shingles in thick sheets as something tore from one side of the roof to the other. Then it stopped, right above the chimney. Silence. Then the scratching began again, but louder this time, harder, more frantic. Something was clawing directly into the chimney. Metal shrieked. Sparks rained down into the stove. Ash burst out in small clouds. "Oh God," I whispered, backing away. A deep groaning sound echoed from inside the flue, like metal tearing under pressure. Then it happened. The flue cap blew off. Snow burst into the stove in a violent spray, extinguishing the fire in an instant. The house plunged into cold darkness. I heard something slithering inside the chimney, something large, scraping downward. I ran to the back door, yanked it open. The wind nearly knocked me off my feet. I bolted into the storm, ripping through waist-deep snow. My flashlight was useless, just white chaos in every direction. The cold stabbed into my lungs with each breath. Behind me, a sound, a heavy, dragging thud onto the living room floor. It had come through. I didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't breathe. I pushed toward the Fontaine house next door, nearly collapsing by the time I reached her porch. I pounded on the door. She opened it immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Inside!" she cried, pulling me in. "Quickly!" She shut the door behind me, locked it, then slid a wooden bar across the frame. Her house was dim, lit only by candles. She grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around me. "Did it see you leave?" she asked. I don't know." She blew out 3 candles, leaving us in deeper darkness. Pray it didn't. We huddled in her kitchen for hours while the storm battered the walls. Every sound made me jump. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps. Around 4 a.m. the storm died. Silence fell over the world. We waited another hour before she dared open the curtain. My house looked wrong. The snow around it was trampled, heavily, deeply, like something with enormous weight had circled it again and again. But there were no tracks leading away. Only around, only circling. I didn't return until daylight. Inside, the smell hit me first, metallic, cold, wrong. The living room was destroyed. Claw marks gouged into the hardwood, the chimney was warped and split open from the inside, and in the ash near the stove, I saw something horrible. Long, wide prints, not human, not animal, something in between. Something heavy enough to crack the wood beneath it. I sat on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. It had been inside the house, inside. And if I hadn't run, I don't know what would have happened. That spring I sold the house, moved south. People said I overreacted, that it was a wild animal, that isolation got to me. But I know what I heard, what I saw, what stood above me every storm night. And even now, months later, living far from Quebec, I still can't sleep when heavy snow hits the roof. Because sometimes, late at night, when the world goes quiet after a snowfall, I hear it again. Thump, on the roof, slow, steady, deliberate, something walking across the shingles, something searching, something that followed me farther than it should have. Because whatever climbs the rooftops in winter, it doesn't stay in Saint-Cyril, it finds you, wherever you go. Northern Alberta has a way of keeping its past buried. Most towns up there were built on industries that died decades ago, logging, trapping, mining. When the mines shut down, the towns didn't die, they just changed. People stayed, but the light went out of things. Stores closed, schools emptied, and the old mining sites became places everyone agreed to ignore. I grew up in one of those towns, Cold Ridge, a cluster of houses and rusted trucks clinging to the edge of the wilderness. My dad worked in the mine before it shut down. I never knew exactly what the shutdown was about. He never explained, and when I asked, he'd just say, "Some things aren't worth digging up." I didn't understand that until I found myself deep underground one winter night, listening to footsteps climbing the mine shaft toward me. Footsteps belonging to someone who hadn't been alive for decades. It started with a dare. I was 23 at the time, working odd jobs around town. One night, a few friends and I gathered at the old bar off Highway 58. Someone brought up the mine, specifically the abandoned elevator at Shaft 3. "That thing still works," my friend Logan said, taking a swig of beer. "I heard it go down last week." "That's impossible," I said. "There's no power." "Exactly," he said, grinning. "So who used it?" The table went quiet. Everyone in Cold Ridge had heard rumors. Voices underground, lights flickering in the shaft, footsteps echoing where no one should be. I rolled my eyes. "Probably wind." "Wind doesn't hit elevator call buttons," said Logan. I laughed it off then. But later that night, walking home alone, something gnawed at me. What if the elevator really did move? The thought settled under my skin like a splinter. The next morning, I decided to check for myself. Not because I believed the stories, but because curiosity is a hell of a drug. The mine entrance looked exactly how I remembered it. Tall chain-link fence, rusted no entry signs, padlock that looked older than me. Snow drifted halfway up the fence on the south side. It didn't take much to climb over. The main yard was dead silent except for the wind. Old machinery lay frozen in place, metal eaten by time. The air smelled like dust trapped in ice. Shaft 3 sat farthest back, a squat concrete bunker with a metal door that hung crookedly off its hinges. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed the beam. The elevator shaft descended straight down, a black throat stretching so deep I couldn't see the bottom. The elevator car sat at ground level, doors half open as if waiting. I stepped in cautiously. Dust coated the floor. Icicles formed long teeth along the ceiling. Graffiti lined the walls. Dates, names, warnings. One phrase repeated over and over, "Don't go down alone." I snorted softly. Small towns love a good scare. I shone my light on the control panel. The buttons were dead. No lights, no hum, nothing. I pressed the down button anyway. Silence. Of course nothing happened. I stepped out of the elevator, shaking my head at my own stupidity. Then the elevator doors slid shut behind me, on their own. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. "Okay," I said quietly. Old machinery, loose cables, temperature shift, things move. But then the elevator began to descend, smoothly, quietly, deliberately, like someone had called it from below. I staggered backward, watching the elevator sink slowly into the dark, the overhead light fading with it. I should have run. Instead, I stood frozen, staring into the shaft. When the elevator disappeared, I heard something echoing up from below, a metallic clank. Then another. then a sound like footsteps on metal rungs. Something was climbing the lift framework, up toward me. My brain snapped back into gear and I ran. I tore out of the bunker, slipped on the ice outside, scrambled to my feet, and didn't stop running until I reached the fence. When I finally looked back, the entire mine yard looked still, silent, empty. But deep below, in the shaft I'd just fled from, I knew something was awake now. Something that knew I'd been there. Something that was coming up. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard metallic footsteps echoing upward. I tried to convince myself it was just fear, but around midnight I heard something that made my blood run cold. A single heavy knock on my front door. I froze. Cold Ridge was small. People didn't come by unannounced, especially not at night. I approached the door slowly, silently, and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness. Then a second knock. This one lower, closer to the floor. Like someone had crouched down. I backed away, didn't open it, didn't speak. After about a minute, the knocking stopped. But when I checked in the morning, the snow on my porch had been disturbed. One long drag mark leading up to the door. Only one. No footprints, no retreating trail, just that one mark, as if something had crawled up to the door, then vanished. I knew I should have told someone. Instead, I tried to forget. Bad idea. 3 days later, Logan came by. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "You went to the mine, didn't you?" he asked. "How'd you know?" "Because something is wrong in this town," he said, voice shaking. Lights flickering, dogs refusing to go outside, people hearing things under the ground. Whatever came up a few nights ago, it didn't stop. I stared at him, dread building in my stomach. "What did you hear?" He rubbed his face. "Last night, I heard the sound of an elevator bell, like the old ones in the mine, coming from my basement." Cold crawled up my arms. Every hair on my body stood on end. "That's not possible," I whispered. "That's what I thought," he said, "until this morning." He pulled out his phone and showed me a picture, a muddy footprint on his basement floor. Not a boot print, not a shoe, barefoot, long, too long. I felt nauseous. "We need to go back," Logan said. "We need to see what's down there." "No," I said instantly. "Absolutely not." But that night, something changed my mind. I heard the elevator again. Not in the mine. In my house, a soft electric ding. Then the low groaning of old cables tightening, coming from under my floorboards. The sound grew louder, rising through the pipes, vibrating the walls. I backed into the corner, fists clenched, breath shallow. Then, footsteps, the same heavy climbing rhythm I'd heard in the shaft, coming closer, upward, toward the main floor. I grabbed my coat and ran out into the freezing night, slamming the door behind me. I didn't stop until I reached Logan's house. "We go together," I said. He nodded wordlessly. We got in his truck and headed for the mine. The yard was even colder than last time. The wind was dead still, like the whole place was holding its breath. We entered the Shaft 3 bunker together, flashlights trembling in our hands. The elevator sat at ground level again, doors half open. "Waiting," I whispered. "We don't get in it." "Not a chance." We walked to the control panel. All the cables were rusted. The system was dead. It was physically impossible for the elevator to move. And yet, Logan pointed at the dust on the floor. Tracks, bare footprints, leading into the elevator and out again, fresh. I felt my stomach clench. We followed the footprints out of the bunker to the snow. They continued across the yard, but they didn't end. They looped around, again and again, circling the bunker. "How many times did it walk around this place?" Logan whispered. I counted at least 5 loops. Then I noticed something worse. The loops were getting larger, going farther from the shaft each time, expanding, reaching outward, like it was mapping the area, learning. "How far did these go?" I asked. We followed them carefully, flashlights catching every indentation, past the machinery, past the storage shed, past the fence's edge. The footprints continued into the woods. Straight toward town. Logan wiped his mouth with a shaking hand. "We're bringing people into this." "No," I said, "it's already here." Then ahead of us, in the silent trees, we heard the elevator bell. Ding, soft, clear. Logan cursed under his breath. "Run." We sprinted back to the bunker, lungs burning. Snow crunched behind us, slow, heavy, deliberate. Something was following. We reached the bunker and slammed the metal door shut. Logan jammed a broken wrench through the handle. The footsteps stopped outside. Silence. Then, thump. On the roof. Something climbed onto the bunker roof. the metal groaning under its weight. I grabbed Logan's arm. "What do we do?" "We go down," he said, voice shaking. "It's the only place it might not follow. Insanity." But he was right. Whatever was up there, it didn't want us underground. It wanted us out here. I pressed the elevator button. It lit up. Then the doors slid open smoothly. I didn't question it. We ran inside. The doors shut. The elevator descended. Fast, too fast. The walls rattled. Dust shook loose. The light flickered. The air grew colder and colder until I could see my breath. Logan shivered violently beside me. "What floor are we going to?" he whispered. "There are no floors," I said. "There's just the bottom." But the elevator didn't stop. It went deeper, past the documented depth of the shaft, past the geological limit. But we weren't falling. We were being pulled. Then the elevator slowed, stopped. The doors opened, and we stepped into a tunnel that wasn't on any map. A tunnel carved by hand, torch-blackened walls, wooden supports rotting with age. A tunnel that hadn't been touched in a century. Something moved in the darkness ahead. A shape, tall, thin, wrong. Its joints bent like an insect. Its barefoot steps echoed wetly on the stone. Its skin hung loosely like it had been stretched too far. Then it spoke. A whisper made of gravel and breath. "You came down." Logan stumbled backward. "What the hell is that?" The thing stepped closer. I saw its face, or what was left of one, lifeless, pale, half-crushed, like someone who'd been killed in a cave-in and dug their way out over decades. Its voice gurgled. I waited so long. We ran, not toward the elevator, but into the tunnel, because the elevator was now full of dragging footsteps. We sprinted through the dark, flashlights shaking, lungs burning. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, deeper and deeper, until the air grew thin. Behind us, footsteps, dozens of them, echoing, growing louder. More than one thing was in that tunnel. We turned a corner and found a ladder, going straight up. "Go!" I yelled, pushing Logan upward. We climbed, faster, faster, hands burning against the cold metal rungs. Below, shapes gathered, pale hands reaching upward, long arms stretching, whispers echoing like wind through bone. When I reached the top, I slammed into a metal hatch. Pushed, it didn't budge. I screamed and shoved again. This time it burst open, into the night air. We climbed out into the mine yard. The hatch sealed behind us with a heavy clang. Silence, darkness. We stumbled away, collapsing in the snow. The yard was empty, the bunker quiet, the elevator still. We never spoke of what we saw in that tunnel, but we tell people now. If you hear the mining elevator move on its own, don't go anywhere near it. Don't follow the sound. Don't check the shaft. Don't investigate. Because whatever came up from below the earth didn't stop when the mine shut down. It's still climbing, still learning, still walking the town at night. And some nights, when the wind is low and the ground feels hollow beneath my feet, I swear I hear the soft electric ding of an elevator arriving. Right outside my window,